The program you are about to hear has been pre-recorded for air.
Hi, this is Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. Hi, this is Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. First of all,
The program you are about to hear has been pre-recorded for airing at this time. Please hold all phone calls. Once again, the program you are about to hear has been pre-recorded for airing at this time. Please.
Hey everybody, hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I know y'all looking at me and y'all saying, hey, what's really going on? Well, I'm in a new spot right now, and I tell you, the Wyleaner show is on the road. The rubber meets the road. Yes, indeed, it is time once again for the Wyleaner show, and it is time for part 6 of the Don C. Harris Challenge for the Wyleaner show. And I have my guest with me today, and I'm excited about being back with you all. I'm actually not in the studio, but I am live, okay? I am live once again right here, and I want to welcome everybody back. I welcome everybody who is watching out there on WyleanerTVShow.com and everybody who is watching on KKVV.com, everybody who's watching on YouTube, Google Hangout, in Pakistan, everybody who's watching everywhere, all over the whole wide world. I'm excited that you came back to be with me again today. And I have my guest with me, and I tell you, the rubber's going to meet the road up in here. Y'all don't, if you don't know it, you better ask somebody. So listen, for callers today, when you call in, if you call in today, you're going to tell my producer, Dale, what your questions are, and he's going to give me those questions, and then I will ask the guests the questions, if you have questions. If not, let's let the rubber make the road, because we've got Don C. Harris, and he's anti-denominational, and we have atheists. Oh my gosh, I tell you, it's gonna be the ball in just a few minutes. And so I just want y'all to do what I tell you to do. Strap up your boots and get ready for the rubber to meet the road. Y'all know who I am. I'm Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel, and I'm excited that you're here. So we're gonna take a break, and y'all know what's gonna happen when we come back. The rubber is gonna meet the road. We'll see you in just a minute.
hi, this is Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. First of all, I really do appreciate your listening and viewing my show every week. I would greatly appreciate your financial assistance as well to keep my show on the air. Please just make some type of contribution. $5, $10, $20, $50, $100 or more, whatever you desire. Please log on to www.wyleanertvshow.com and click the pay button. Or please send your check or money order to Wyleaner, that's spelled Wyleaner, to 420 North Nellis Boulevard, Suite A3, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89110. Also, if you would like to be a guest on the show, please call 702-242-2100 or email me at wyleanertvshow@aol.com. That's all for now. And thanks again for your continued support. Blessings to you too. And this is where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, everybody, listen, we are back, and I'm excited that I have my guests with me today. And I have two wonderful guests. Of course, you know one of them. That's that Don C. Harris. Boy, I tell you, he is a piece of work. Oh, he's a piece of work. I've been dealing with this guy for a while now, and I tell you, I just don't know. I don't know what I got myself into, but y'all know how Wyleaner is. Wyleaner always getting herself caught up in something. But I know how to get out of it, though. That's for sure. And I know how to handle whatever I get myself into. And I'm going to handle some Don C. Harris right about now. And Don C. Harris, are you with me today?
I'm with you, and I'm listening. I'm hearing it all from Pie Town, New Mexico.
Okay, Don. Okay. All right. Well, Don, welcome back. Welcome back to the Wyleaner Show, and
Thank
I'm
you.
excited that you came back. And I've got a challenger for you once again today. I have a challenger for you, and he is not. I want you to know, Don, he is not shaking in his boots. Okay. This guy is another piece of work. You best believe it when I tell you. And so I want to reintroduce. Now, you know what, everybody? It's been a long time since this guy's been on my show. Actually, I think it's probably been a couple years. And so, you know, I'm going to let him just come on and maybe tell you just a teeny bit about himself. But he was on once upon a time on the Wyleaner Show quite some time ago. And his name is Jefferson Montoya. Jefferson, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Don, nice to meet you. Good to see you again, Wyleaner.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. All right. So, Jefferson, welcome back to the Wyleaner Show. And, Jefferson, I'd like to ask you, where are you calling from?
Today I'm in Lehi, Utah, just about that far from the capital of Mormonism.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I have absolutely no clue as to where that is. But I'm sure somebody knows, right?
I think there are people in this town that don't know where it is. we certainly don't have a claim to fame in the Pie City. Pie Town's a great name for a place. It'd be neat if all American cities were just named after some sort of food. Chicken Leg Town, Burrito Town. Be awesome.
Okay, well now you know, I don't know if Don is going to allow you to talk about the pie place where he lived, you know. But you know, I'm just saying, you know, I don't know if he's gonna let you get away with talking about the pie place, you know. Although I've been trying to get him to send me some pie from out there. I figure they should have good pies since they named the town Pie Town. What do you say, Don?
That's the history of the town. I understand the ladies used to make the cowboys pies when they came through, so that's how it got its name.
All righty then. Okay, well listen guys, look, we got some territory to cover, and so we might as well get this party started. Are y'all ready for the rubber to meet the road?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. So we're gonna start with the questions right now, and Mr. Montoya, you know the rules of the debate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to begin with the questions, and let's get this discussion going so we don't waste any time. My first question is for you, Mr. Jefferson Montoya. I would like to ask you, why don't you believe in God?
Well, I don't believe in God for the same reason many atheists don't believe in God. There's just not evidence for it, and I don't believe in God for the same reason that many non-atheists don't believe in unicorns or military intelligence. Well, wait, that's probably really a real thing. I don't believe in the things that is not to say that I have to see something to believe that it exists. Of course, that's not the case. But there must be evidence, and that evidence has to be something that can be falsifiable evidence, and it has to be something that can be truly predictive. That's how we know that something exists, because we can test it. Even the things that we can't touch or see or smell or hear, we can still test those things when they're real. And so I don't have that belief any longer in a God, because there's no evidence that provides that. That's not to say that I know there isn't a God.
Okay, discussion.
It was totally expected. That is the common answer. That's the common answer among most atheists, that they just don't believe in things for which they have no evidence. So no surprises there. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So you're okay with that answer, Mr. Harris?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the next question is there anything in your life that you believe in for which you have no evidence? Is there anything, Jefferson? Is there anything in your life that you believe in for which you have no evidence?
Well, I continue to believe that the Miami Dolphins are going to win some games, and there's certainly a question about what evidence is there.
That's hope.
Not really. I honestly believe, I think that it's honest to say that all of the beliefs I hold, there is evidence for. And some of that evidence is even in the things like I believe in love, and that we can argue about what love is because it's subjective. But the definition that I hold of it can be proven, and all of those things can be proven more readily and more substantially than in a deity, in any deity.
Discussion?
Do you have any evidence at all that Abraham Lincoln was a real person?
Absolutely. Oh, sure. There's lots of
Like?
evidence. Well, for one, we have contemporary history that and not only do we know that these people lived at the time Abraham Lincoln was set to live, but we know that these people wrote it at the time that he was alive. And we do know that, of course, we had photographs at the time, and though photographs can be altered, we know that there were enough people who are tied to that they can provide a credible witness to Abraham Lincoln. Now, we also have thousands of people who saw him dead and alive. No one who claims he was risen from the dead says that they saw him, but there are people who do claim that, which is ridiculous because that's not how bullets work at all. And we have documents that are by Abraham Lincoln. We have his handwriting, and what's even more important is that we have his descendants, and we can now, through DNA, verify whether or not they are, in fact, his descendants, going back to the last DNA sample we have. We know where this person is buried, that person is buried, this person touched that, whatever. So absolutely, there is evidence of Abraham Lincoln, and I have to say, I expected more. Abraham Lincoln. Well, maybe it would have been better to go for Aristotle.
Every piece of evidence that you just gave is equally applicable to Jesus Christ, other than the fact that you're calling history within the last 100 years recent history. You're depending on a lot of men to have told you the truth about somebody that you have never met. No one you have ever met in this life has ever met him. You have to have a lot of faith in a lot of people. But let me make it clear, I do believe in Abraham Lincoln. Go ahead.
Okay, that's comforting. That's comforting. No, actually, okay. The samples that I gave are not the same as the samples of for supporting an existence of Christ as in the Bible. That's absolutely silliness. You have people.
No. You're talking about a. Well, okay, I'm sorry, but what you're saying is a preponderance of evidence. You're not giving evidence of him ever having existed. There is no evidence, hard, repeatable evidence that he ever lived. Especially not that history. Especially not that the history that we know about him is indeed true, because many historians write different things.
Okay, so let me go back and correct you on this, because I feel like this is going to come up very often. There are a few books out there that will tell you there's a God, and when you say, well, I'm using the last 100 years as recent history, of course I am. That's fairly recent. It's a blink in the existence of the universe. It's nothing that we can call ancient or very old. But what we know is that there were people alive at that time, and those people did have written word, and they did go and see Abraham Lincoln, and they saw him in huge numbers, and they didn't write about it 50 years after or a million years after, or 6 heavenly days and nights after. They wrote about it the morning after it was verified. Now, there are lots of instances where the specifics of what he said are arguable because the history was repeated differently then, but that he was there, that he spoke in Baltimore on a specific day, and Baltimoreans saw that and heard him and shook his hand, is completely different from any sort of evidence of a deity or a Christ. I'm sorry, there's just no way to. Trying to water it down and say, well, I don't know anybody from then, is one of the silliest arguments that I've ever heard for saying that there's no evidence of anyone who lived before you. I don't know your great-great-grandfather, nor do I know anyone who knew him, but I assure you he existed and can be proven, because life is sexually transmitted. And if you hadn't had sex, you wouldn't be here. So not only do I know that he existed, but I know that at some point in time he procreated.
So, then what if I told you my father was Abraham Lincoln? My grandfather, great-great-grandfather, was Abraham Lincoln. I mean, you're saying that what you're saying is that the laws of procreation prove that I had a grandfather. But what I'm saying is that you're being disingenuous when you say that there is evidence. When you talk about evidence, you're talking about something that you can actually see with your eyes or trust that someone is telling you the truth. I maintain that the reason that you don't believe the stories about Jesus Christ is because the stories are not true, not because he wasn't.
Actually, no. And no again. First off, that's not how evidence works either. There are many things that we have evidence of, scientifically speaking, that we cannot see, and we don't necessarily need to trust someone to tell us about. Something like, say, gravity. You can't see it, but you can test it. And when somebody tells you this is how gravity works, you can go out and you can test it. And this is, in fact, what scientists do all the time. And they test that thing that they can't see using things they do see. And because it's true, Don, it has a predictive ability. And that means two things. One, I can know if it's right, this will happen. And also, if it's wrong, this may happen or this won't happen. And so we can reverse the experiments. Okay. Now, if you tell me that your great-great-grandfather, which I don't know if mathematically works out, probably have to be another great, was Abraham Lincoln, then we can test that, because history and documents do count as evidence when you're talking about things like people. Of course they do. And so we have a genealogy of him. He did have children that had siblings. We do have a bloodline there. We can trace that history back. And as long as they are consistent leading up to where we test you, as long as they're consistently, these are relatives of, then we can know whether or not that was your great-great-great-grandfather. So in both situations, you're oversimplifying evidence so that you can have a broader way to fit things into it, but that's not really how it works. And we can test that right now. We can provide evidence of my claim right now by saying that if evidence allows us to reverse an experiment, then all you have to do is provide a piece of evidence that there's a God. Evidence that there's a God.
No. I would never attempt. I would never attempt to give evidence for God. There is no evidence for God. There is none. There likely never will be until the end of time. I am probably the only Christian you will ever meet that will admit that, but it is indeed true. There is no evidence for God. Okay.
I'm not going to argue against that.
So if I find a quarter under my pillow and my tooth falls out, is that evidence for the tooth fairy?
No, it's evidence that there was a quarter underneath your pillow that you were unaware of.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. When you're telling me that there's documents that prove the existence of people, and we have genealogies and such, so you're claiming that genealogies cannot be frauded, they can't be messed with at all. I mean, you're putting a whole lot of trust in something, and it's very disingenuous to say that what we read in the scriptures are not true and they've been tampered with, but these other things haven't been. I mean, you do see that that is an illogical argument, don't you?
Sure, it is the way you phrased it, but what you neglected was that I said as we go down, we can use science, we can test your DNA. And that's something that's a lot more difficult to falsify. And so if we don't have a direct line and we can't test every person and a sample of every person and know that all those samples are, then at the best we can say, well, it's not impossible that you're related to this man. But
Exactly.
don't pretend that I was just relying on what somebody else said. I specifically said we should turn to something that we can prove. And that is the problem. Of course we shouldn't trust what the Bible says. It's riddled with falsified things. We know it's been changed. Because we have the history of how it's been changed. We have
Would you be
older
surprised to
copies
know
that
that I agree with you?
No, I know that you agree, and I know that you have before said that there is no evidence for God. My
I agree
argument
that the
to you
Bible has
is
been falsified. I agree
right,
that
and
the
so
Bible is not necessarily trustworthy in a lot of areas. I agree with you.
so it's fine to have a book that you believe in that you understand could very easily be classified as fiction. I have no issue with that. I'm happy for you. As long as people aren't legislating out of that book, as long as they're not taking an article of faith out of, and not just that book, the Quran is just as bad in my estimation. Okay. Any religious text, if you're taking these unprovable things and you're legislating onto other people, like how they should live, that's an issue for me. But honestly, outside of that, I don't care if you want to believe something that, like
Okay, guys, listen, I want to ask the next question, and it's in relation to what you guys are saying right now. So let's just move on to the next question. And the next question is, Jefferson, have you read the Bible?
Yes, I've read the Bible numerous times, front to back. I've read it critically. I've taken critical courses to study it. I was a priest. I've read the Quran. I haven't studied it as well because I don't trust the translations that I have. Also, the Book of Mormon, front to back. I mean, I'm not most atheists that I know, and we talked about this before on your show, Wyleaner. Most that I know took the time and the effort to really research it before they became atheists, and by label. So of course I have.
They're more studied than Christians in my experience.
Yeah, I think
it's true.
But it's I think that I know that there's actually a lot of surveys where they ask religious questions and the atheists score higher than the people who are of those religions on getting the answers correctly, questions that are doctrinal. But I think that it's a little unfair for atheists to raise that as a flag and wave it around and be like, I know your religion better than you, because many people. And I think this is part of the reason that, Don, that you're anti-denominational. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Many people, when they go to church, they're raised in that religion from birth, and they're at a disadvantage because they're given an interpretation, and they're told that this interpretation is correct, and they're taught to read the Bible in segments if they're going to read it at all. And that's a very difficult thing to overcome. Say you grow up like that, 18, 20, 35 years.
Yes. I agree. I think that the main trouble here, and the main problem with most atheists, and you mention it over and over in your dissertation, that your complaint or your concern is not necessarily God or whether or not He exists, but the people who think He does, and them running things and legislating, and most of your complaints are with the idiots that are involved in Christianity and not God Himself. I'm afraid you may have falsely accused God.
I know. Actually, I didn't falsely accuse God because I don't believe in a God. I don't accuse things. I never blame Santa or the Easter Bunny. I don't believe in Him at all. It's not an existence that there's nothing for me to point at. I absolutely blame human beings who want to hide behind their belief to hurt other people. And there's I'm in Utah, and just yesterday there was a breaking change in the LDS Church where they basically have pitted children against their parents. If their parents are legally gay married, they've pitted the children against their parents. And they're doing this and saying, oh, well, it's God's will and we're protecting the children, but that's still hurting people. I don't blame God for that because I don't believe in God. I don't blame Zeus or Ra or Hathor, but I absolutely blame the people who said they could do that. And I loathe that they have that get out of jail free card. Well, my morality comes from God, and this thing must be moral, even though to every reasonable person that's a gut-wrenching feeling that that can't possibly be. You know what I'm saying? But I don't blame God.
I agree.
I don't believe in God.
I agree. Well, it is just that you would have to admit that there very well could be a God who has chosen to only expose himself to people who believe in him by faith. He has chosen not to manifest himself in the earth, and if that is true and he has decided to hide, you might be letting the fools that are involved in Christianity keep you from actually discovering him yourself. Outside of religion, outside of so-called Christianity, outside of even the Bible, it would be a horribly expensive fault on your part to ignore the existence of something that people have believed in for millennia.
Well, there are lots of things that people believed in for millennia that didn't turn out to be true. You know, your spirit doesn't leave your body when you sneeze, nor do demons jump in. You can't cure boils by rubbing chicken blood on them. Those sorts of things. So, but I understand what you're saying because I've heard you before say that there are people who are creating atheists.
Yes.
And I find that very funny because if one believes that there's a God that creates everybody, then obviously he creates atheists. And if he didn't want for them to be atheists, he shouldn't have made them atheists because he's perfect.
You really don't understand what I was saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but I want to point out that those people aren't making me not believe in a God. You know,
you mention them a lot for them not to have any effect in your life. You mention them a lot.
Well, they do have an effect in my life because I watch how they're harming other people. And I grew up in Utah, which is a very religious state, and I grew up under the rules that are really, it's the only way that I can say is that it's just blatantly unjust. And I don't like to see that. Now, I understand that the justice and morality and fairness, that those are all subjective. But of course you mentioned someone who hurt you a lot. They're on your mind. And I think that's why you run into a lot of angry atheists. A lot of people do that. For me, I'm not angry. I get annoyed. But I'm not going around saying we shouldn't believe in God. We shouldn't, because I don't care what you do. Just stop hurting other people. Which fascinates me because if you ask most Christian sects, that's exactly what they want to boil it down to. They want to say, oh, you just got to be Christ-like. You just got to not hurt people. And honestly, the most Christ-like people I know are almost all atheists, top to bottom. But I don't think that I'm losing anything there, Don, and I don't think that I'm at risk of losing anything, and here's why. If there's an all-knowing, all-powerful, benevolent God, and then I lead a good life, and when I die, he's like, you did a great job, but I didn't say Simon Says. You didn't follow this silly little rule, so you go to hell, or you don't exist anymore. Well, that's not a God that I need to feel like worshiping, because that's an immoral move, in my opinion, anyway. And if that's what people had to do to get into this special club that excludes thousands and millions of other wonderful people,
again, you're
that
speaking
doesn't
of
seem like love to me. And if I if I cease to exist, I'm okay with that, because there was a time in the very recent future, I'm going to go with 1973, when I didn't exist, and I don't really seem to be that bent about it.
Again, you're assigning ideas, doctrines that men teach, and not what the Bible teaches. The Bible does not teach this, what you're saying about him And I understand that you're being facetious when you say the Simon Says rule, but yeah, you're right. There are people out there that are so ignorant as to tell you that you have to say a certain name or be baptized or join a certain church. I understand all that. But that's hogwash. That's not what the scriptures say. That's not what I have ever received from God myself. There is no truth in that whatsoever.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because I remember, I don't know if it was when you were speaking to the Seventh-day Adventist or when you were on a different radio show, but you had mentioned that we still need to follow the rules, the Old Testament, that still counts. Do you remember saying that? The laws of the Old Testament still count?
The Ten Commandments, yes.
But that's only for the Ten Commandments. It's
Certainly.
not for all of Leviticus and Numbers and the stuff at the end of Judges, and those laws we don't have to keep.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, guys.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You guys are just leading me right into these questions. I can see that clearly. So my next question is, gentlemen, Mr. Jefferson, which of the 10 commandments do you feel is unnecessary?
Unnecessary. You mean, what are the rules of the Ten Commandments? Well, let's start with the big ones that are right up at the beginning. I don't believe you have to avoid taking anyone's name in vain, or that you have to worship any one God. I mean, that seems like a pretty important thing. I don't think it's necessary. If we use the word necessary, you have to do this. You have to remember that morality is subjective. There are cultures all over the world, and have been for as long as there's been man, who don't agree with all of these things, like murder.
Yes.
There are people who say, nope, there's times when you can murder. I don't necessarily agree with that. But in a way, some of these rules aren't necessary because just stop doing that. Like, people know instinctively not to do that. The only ones I would say are unnecessary are the worship, keep the Sabbath day holy, worship only me because I'm jealous, but envy is a sin, that stuff. I can skip that. I think the other rules are good to have.
Discussion?
And of course, I don't know if you've made the connection in what you said and my assertion that if a person does have faith that there is a God, you would have to say that the first 4 commandments are indeed rules that would offend the God that you don't have evidence for. And that's where I am. I have a God that I do not have evidence for. However, I believe that he exists, and I believe that he gave these 10 commandments, and therefore, throughout his scriptures, he says that we must keep these commandments in order to meet him on good terms on Judgment Day.
So, all right, I agree with you. These could be very important to some people, but there's something that's interesting about this. I know when he speaks about commandments throughout, and we have to remember how the Torah works. But the way he speaks about commandments throughout the Old Testament, he doesn't just mean these that were given at Sinai. He doesn't just mean these that were given to Moses. He means all, and that's hundreds of rules. And
I'm afraid
lots of them are just silly. But if there's a God, and he's this all-powerful, all-knowing,
the Bible doesn't say that, friend. Again, you're talking about what people tell you about God.
I'm the only reason that I'm choosing these terms is because if he's not those things, then I don't need to worship him, because what is his power? And if you're such an ancient creature or being or life form or intelligence, and you're so petty as to say, you can't have other gods before me, or you can't have graven images, or don't abuse my name, you know what, dude? Do with me what you will. I have much more energy, or better things to spend my energy on, than worrying about hurting your eternal feelings. You are the Alpha and the Omega. You are all. And yet, your jealousy is so important that you got to give me 4 rules about it before I get to the other more important things? 4 rules about how petty you are before I get to don't kill people?
I don't understand. how a person. I mean, are you married, Jefferson?
No, I did that. It was awful.
Well, okay. Well, because there are people in your life, much less a God. There are people in your life that don't want anybody else before them. I don't know why you think that's so unreasonable.
Well, it's absolutely unreasonable, because those people who want, if you have a wife and she says, don't put anybody before me, she obviously doesn't mean in all circumstances don't save the kids before you save me. She doesn't mean don't respect your boss.
Where does God say in all circumstances?
Well, hold on now. He says, thou shalt have no other gods. It doesn't even mean that you can't have them in a different order. It says don't do it. Thou shalt have no other gods. Plain and simple. It's all. So if your wife tells you, if you marry someone, and he says, and she says you can't have other people in your life, then that's a problem. But the other thing about it is, if you're comparing some incorporeal, eternal. I'm just going to use the term being. If there's some eternal being that has all of this life experience. Maybe they don't know everything, but they certainly have had all this life experience. And you're going to compare that to your wife, who's in her 40s, 50s. How old are you? You're like in your 50s. Don't correct me.
I'm not saying that he's just because a woman says this. I'm saying that this is a part of life. If your son decided that he is going to call the fella across the road his daddy from now on, you would have a problem with that. Am I to say, what's the matter with you? Are you just so egotistical that you think the whole world revolves around you? Or would you insist, no, that's my boy? I don't understand how people can assign these horrible motives to God's commandments.
No.
He loves us and wants to be our dad, and so therefore he's egotistical. What a horrible thing to say about anybody, much less God.
Oh, come now. First off, if my son says, hey, that other guy across the street is now my dad, and first off, all right, that other guy across the street clearly exists. And the second thing is, now I've got something to work out with my son. But is it a sin that he did that? Is that something punishable? No, he clearly lacks an understanding. And so now, instead of playing some game of being invisible and choosing not to make myself known to my son, I sit my son down and I say, what's going on, brother? Why is it you feel I'm no longer your dad and that guy's the dad? So there's no ego in that. There's a correct
so if you were absent,
there's a correct way that our culture functions, and in our culture, the function is that the offspring refer to the male figure as father, and if he doesn't want to refer to me as father, then I need to correct out where he is culturally, but it's not a sin. That's just silliness. And the other thing is, if you say, do not take the Lord's name in vain. No graven images or likenesses. How are those not petty? How are those not petty? Here's one.
You know what we're talking about today?
Against rape.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was talking over you. Go ahead.
What we're talking about today, the problem that we have with the conventional church today, the reason they look like fools is because they have taken the name of the Lord in vain. And now that does not mean putting damn on the end of the word God, as the silly church has taught. These are people who call themselves God's people. They take his name, but they don't. Their lives don't show that they have any concern about his way at all. That we are having this discussion. This is the seed of the atheist fertilizer you hear me talk about all the time. This is why people have take such exception to God, because people have taken his name in vain. You'll never convince me that that's a petty commandment.
Well, I think it's interesting that's your interpretation, and I think it fits fine, and it's pretty, and it's tidy. But the bottom line is, there are things in the world that are worse than that do more damage, that a human can do more damage than to say, well, I speak for God. Because in order for him to have to do real power, he or she to do real power, while saying they speak for God, they got to get a bunch of people to listen to him. But it takes one jerk to knock his wife around. It takes one fool to rape somebody. It takes one really horrible person to hurt a child, and none of those things are commandments. So even if we pretend that there was a limitation on how many he could give, the fact that there are 4 of them that are all, hey, tell me how great I am, worry about me, and then of the 6 that are remaining, there are huge humane crimes that we don't address, that don't fall underneath them unless we stretch things out quite thinly. Quite simply, you're worried about your name, but you're not worried about telling dudes not to rape.
Okay.
I cannot worship someone with those priorities. I mean, I just can't.
Okay, guys, let's move on to the next question here, which, like I said, you guys are just leading me right into these questions. Okay, so the next
question.
Thanks. Okay, so the next question is, will a man ever have to give an account of cheating, raping, or stealing from their neighbor? Jefferson?
Well, first, if they get caught in, in the mortal world, then sure, they should have to give an account. I don't know. And that's the other thing I think Don knows that this is my stand. I'm not saying there is no God. I'm saying I don't believe in a God. There may be a God, and that God may be exactly as described in the Bible. I don't know if someone will have to give that account. They might be the God that's described in the Quran. Maybe. I don't know. But I think that when we talk about gambles and what you stand to lose, I think that's the worst reason to not do those things. Don't do those things so that they're not done and so that it doesn't become normal and it doesn't harm the propagation of the species. Just don't. So whether you have to make that accounting or not, but I don't know that people ever will. And I'm with you. I think a lot of believers feel this injustice in this world. And I got to tell you, there are people who I think Dick Cheney is a murderous man. I think he caused lots of people to die for no good reason but his own gains. And I hope one day.
I'm sorry, who?
Dick Cheney.
Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that someday he gets his recompense. But whether we hope for it or we wish for it, I don't think that makes it factual. And I don't know what's going to happen.
Discussion?
Unfortunately, the scenario that you just laid out is saying that you can pretty much do whatever you want to do as long as you don't get caught, because there is no judgment in our future.
No, I don't believe that to be true, and that's not what I said, Don. What I said is, if you get caught, of course.
Wait a minute. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth. I'm just saying that the scenario that you laid out allows a person to take on the attitude that if I don't get caught by the legal authorities, then I can get away with murder.
You're saying you're not putting words in my mouth, but that's absolutely not what I said. It's like the first 10 words that come out of my mouth that you're very clear on, and then whatever description after that you have ignored. And the thing is, first off, I said if they get caught, then they are going to have to face some. That's what I said. I didn't say they don't have to if they don't get caught. And that's important. Right. The other thing is, I specifically said that your reason you should not do that is because you shouldn't make that a norm. You shouldn't make it normal. If I can do that, if I can steal from you, Don, come to your house and steal from you, and I don't have to pay a price for that, and that becomes the norm, that doesn't help our species. And
you're using the word
shouldn't. We're not wired to do that to each other, and the
you're
people
using
who are
the
wired
word
that
shouldn't.
way are miswired. They're wired way different from the masses of us. And secondly, I'm not giving anyone a free pass. You shouldn't do things that harm other people. Just don't do it.
Who says?
And if you need a special book to tell you that, or you need to believe that when you die you're going to be punished, and that's going to keep you from doing it, all right, I'll take it.
Who says you shouldn't do that? You?
Well, every person has some base of morality.
Well, that is a supposition on your part, Jefferson. That is
Absolutely
a supposition.
Absolutely not.
Every person?
Sure.
Come on.
Every person has their own morality.
And do you know that every person has a nose on their face? You don't know that.
So
How
you're
can you
telling me
say
there are people
every
who have
person has an
you're saying there are
understanding of
people who have
morality?
zero moral code. That somewhere in this world, they have
Absolutely.
despite the fact that scientists are discovering through the behavior of other animals in the kingdom, natural, what we humans would call morality. That because they're protecting their own species. So despite that, you say there are people who have zero morality. It's very interesting when you look at people like serial killers, like Ted Bundy. And Ted Bundy, before he died in his last interview, he specifically said that the murder he felt bad about was a little girl in Florida. But he was already on the hook for 18 women. And the reason why is because that was a little girl and that was crossing a line for him. So even that piece of garbage had morality. It wasn't your morality. It wasn't mine.
Well,
In my opinion,
frankly,
it wasn't sufficient.
that's not
but it
enough for
was.
me. That's not enough. If he draws the line at little girls, he's willing to kill 18 women. That's not enough.
Listen, I just said it's insufficient. In my opinion, it's insufficient. But we can't say that you're telling me that it's inaccurate for me to make a claim that everybody has their own morality.
I'm saying that morality comes from our God.
I hope not. I hope that's not true.
It's almost the only evidence in the earth for God, my friend.
What is the evidence in the earth for God?
The only evidence for God in the earth is the fact that Ted Bundy didn't want to kill the little girl. It's the only evidence for him that there is any good in anybody on the face of the planet.
Oh, that can't possibly be something that you believe. That line that piece of garbage drew, that was the only evidence for any good? So all the good things people do aren't evidence for good? All the good things that atheists do without God, those aren't evidence for just good in the world? And never mind that there are other animals in the kingdom that display the same sorts of moralities that we do, especially when it comes to killing and the sharing of mates in some animals. That is just silliness. This idea that man is separate from the rest of his environment is detrimental to the good of man and his environment.
I've been very patient with your condescending tone toward me of calling me silly and calling me a fool and these kind of things. I am not making fun of your belief or lack of it. I would appreciate a little bit of respect here for somebody who has been in this way for about 50 years of my life. So, this is not something that I learned last week. This is not something that my parents gave me. This is something that I have sought out and found within myself. So, a little respect, please.
So that you feel disrespected, I apologize for. It's not my intention. When I call an argument silly, I don't mean it silly in a way to degrade somebody. I mean it silly in its basis.
You can't possibly believe that. Is not a nice thing to say. You can't possibly believe that is not a nice thing to say to somebody who has faith in God.
Okay, then let's test it, all right? Because that was actually a compliment to you. What you said after saying that Ted Bundy that him feeling bad about killing the little girl was the closest thing to evidence in God. You then said that it was the evidence of good. It was the only evidence of good. And if you use the word only, then that gets rid of all the other evidences of good. So the reason I said you can't possibly believe that is that I believe, I don't believe,
if I said only evidence of good,
you believe there are other evidences of good other than that.
If I said only evidence of good, I must have misspoke that, because that's not what I think. It's not the only evidence of good. I'm saying that the good that is in us is the only vestigial evidence of God in the earth today. The fact that we have any good in us at all. So
again, you don't in fact believe that's the only evidence of good, which is what I thought you couldn't possibly believe that. Is that you gotta so as far as it being evidence of God, the good in us, the problem is that good, what you see as good, what I see as good, might be closer than what someone in China sees as good, or and unfortunately,
so who determines just the boundaries?
Well, right. That's why I'm saying that morality really is subjective. It changes by culture, it changes by location, it changes by history. we're at an interesting time in the United States where our morality is changing. The morality that's reflected by our laws is changing. So if there were a God and that God gave everybody morality, one would hope that it would be a consistent morality. But if that God is the God of the Bible, and the morality of the Bible is the morality for humanity, I hope that's not true.
I assure you that what we see in the conventional church today, the morality, so-called morality in the conventional church today, does not represent the Lord God Jehovah at all. Neither the Catholic Church, nor the Protestant Church, nor the Jews, nor any of them does not represent what is clearly printed in the pages of Scripture.
Well, what's clearly printed in the pages of Scripture are laws that say when your child disobeys you, you should take him to the edges of the town and have him stoned. That to me seems very immoral, but it's clearly printed in the Scripture.
This is why we're supposed to read the laws of Moses with a very jaundiced eye. This is why I take exception when you say that when he says keep my commandments that he's talking about the hundreds of commandments, when in reality God only wrote 10 commandments with his finger in stone. He's only talking about the 10. He's not talking about the hundreds of Mosaic commandments. I know that's what they teach in seminary, but it ain't so.
Well, that's your word against someone else's there, because you're saying your interpretation is correct, and that's another reason why we can't just turn to a Bronze Age book and say no, this is the seed. But I think that it's interesting, even as the archaeological evidence piles up, to say there never was an Exodus. It's even more difficult to then say, well, there wasn't an Exodus, but there was a Moses, and God did write during the Exodus onto the stone with his finger.
Okay.
Once you...
Guys,
Sorry,
we got to take a break. We got to take a break, guys. We got to go pay some bills or try to get some bills paid, okay? So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, guys, we're back. Now listen, you guys have had some discussion here, okay? And I appreciate all the discussion.
We've been having a good time.
Yeah, I can clearly see that. I can clearly see that. Okay, so listen, Don, you wanted to ask Jefferson about a movie. You wanted to ask him had he seen this movie, and you asked him that, and then Jefferson answered the question, and then give you a 1-minute closing thought, please. Don, what was the name of the movie you wanted to know?
Zeitgeist. Are you familiar with the movie Zeitgeist?
Yeah, I had to sit through it several times to sort of, because it's just so. Yeah, at first I thought it was going to be a documentary. And I think that's what made me have to struggle through it so many times, because there were so many things that were just easily disproven, and we could go on and on about the silliness of it, but it's not. And this time I do mean that in a condescending way, because it's this close to just
give your
one
closing
big pile of conspiracy theories. Here's all I have to say about it. Don, I've heard you say that there's very few honest atheists because they all have an agenda. I don't have an agenda. I don't care what people
Oh,
believe.
no.
Just be
I don't
kind
know
to
that.
people.
Don?
This was on a afterwards. Don, let's talk about it. I'll remind you, it's on a YouTube video with you on a radio interview, and maybe your opinion has changed. But you know, as far as atheism goes, and your anti-denominational stand, a lot of it's very clear and very close together. And I think that's cool. I think it's excellent that you and Wyleaner are both doing. You both take the same stand. Like, let's learn it. Quit waiting for some preacher to tell you about it. Quit,
Okay.
you know, don't believe me. And I appreciate being on the show with two people who have that sort of openness.
Okay, thanks, Jefferson. Don, you actually don't even have a whole minute, so go for it really quick, please.
I want to say thanks.
30
I really
seconds.
did enjoy this. I did enjoy this conversation, and I think it's good that we talk about these things. I want you to know that we're really not that far apart on this. It is just a matter of faith, and I do happen to believe that not everybody in the world is called to be Christian.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right, guys. Listen, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being with me today. We got to run. I'll see you next week. Y'all know who I am. I'm Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel. You know what show this is. This is the Wyleaner Show, and this is where the rubber meets the road. I'll see you next week.